And we are live for yet another Naible Nexus Live. Thanks for joining us or tuning in later. With you today, have co-founder Jerry Brand, as well as myself, Randy Larrier. John is en route to a very important business meeting. James is taking some much needed uh, vacation. Maybe more of the team will pop in as we go. But Jerry, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. I am likewise on family vacation out here in Colorado. So we are enjoying some of the mountain air and getting in quite a few hikes every day.
Awesome. This sounds amazing. I'm also not in my normal location. I'm on a boat, obviously. Uh, I'm actually in New York City for a few meetings this afternoon. So everything is jury rigged here. I've got my laptop propped up on my backpack, and we're making the best of it.
Perfect.
Uh, so, Jerry, I was thinking today, we get a lot of different interesting conversations about AI. People come from all sorts of backgrounds. And what I was thinking we try to do is just maybe do like a Q&A session. Now, we don't always have everybody uh, with us real time, so I'm sure we'll catch you up later and definitely let us know in the comments or reach out over LinkedIn, YouTube, X, or anywhere else that you catch this stream. But give us a shout about things that are tripping you up when it comes to working with AI. What I thought I'd do is I'll share Nexus. I had it do a little bit of research for us so that we can have a conversation with our AI about our AI and help to solve people's AI problems. So hopefully this works. You can see that screen.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Now I don't know what came through here. This is as live as it gets. So we'll see what we find. I had asked our researcher tool common struggles when people start using generative AI, and the results got back. Companies struggle to deploy AI due to high costs and confusion. I have seen this firsthand. How about you?
Absolutely. I think a common question that we get, Randy, and almost everyone that we've spoken to is just where do I start?
That is a great question. So I'm going to let this go a little bit deeper. And while we let this thing populate, where do we start? Where do you start?
Um, it's interesting, right? So I was actually sitting down this week, formulating some of my thoughts for my social media posts, and I realized that you know being a lifelong learner is is where you start, right? What am I interested in? How can this help me? And it's really just about having the dialogue and being willing to ask the questions. Um, and it's as simple as that. It doesn't have to get much more complicated, right? So we have our AI assistant in here. There's ChatGPT, there's Perplexity, right? There's a million models out there that you can interact with, but it's really approaching it with curiosity and starting with questions. And so that's typically my guidance that I give, whether it's a personal friend, a professional engagement, or any of the customers that we've been working with or clients we've been working with, is really just approach it with curiosity and start with questions.
That's a great perspective. And I think, where what I see from people have kind of almost diverges into some people are just super enthusiastic and have seen all of the demos or kind of follow us on social and, kind of want to dive in and just figure out how to get it to do what we can do, get it to do. And then a lot of people are skeptical or, have seen and had maybe had a bad experience, used a tool that was maybe overhyped versus the delivery, and maybe even checked out. Where I think the truth is, this is still an emerging field, right? Where there's new innovation and developments every single day, and if you can ride that wave and keep up with some of it, there's some real just magical things that happen. But you need that curiosity and I think grit to recognize that if you try every product the first time you try some of the products, you may not see the potential. But I can tell you, is from playing all around with this stuff over the last decade, is that the rate of change and improvement now is just kind of, you know, parabolic, and it just has massive, massive implications for what's to come. Um, the other thing I found is it's a lot like being a parent. I know, Jerry, you're a mom. I'm a dad with a 6-year-old. Uh, have to be very clear, and sometimes have to correct things that make sense to me, but are interpreted by a fresh mind in a different way. I found that to be an important thing to think through, and it helps me sometimes to be more clear in my dad life. To think about it as just a big, my son has a big AI prompt that I have to give good inputs to get good outputs from. So
What
I'm gonna go
have
see.
what
Go
have
ahead.
been some of your most challenging interactions with AI?
Ooh, one of the big ones, and I think this is something that takes some skill and some research on, is when doing image generation to have consistent characters, or kind of, have themes that fit, what you want. I think with images, it's a lot more apparent when something isn't quite right. Sometimes with text, it can kind of hide. So, I like to work with images also because it is it like a reality check of like, is this picture in my head as clear as I think it is? Can I get a image back? And usually at this point in June of 2025, it's really just on me to be descriptive. There's not really a limit on the models in terms of getting them to look super realistic. But I've struggled with that because it's just not something that I've dedicated as much time to, in terms of, if you see what like John and James, they put out, they've spent a whole lot of time thinking about this, training and tuning models, and even building some that are, really good at some of the fine details of image generation. And so I lean on those guys a lot when I'm thinking about images. Let me flip that to you, Jerry. Where do you find some of the challenges?
Um, this is this is going to be a funny answer. It's me.
Uh-huh.
It's not actually the AI, right? It's me. I find I hold myself back from the interaction, right? Whether it's a research problem or tackling that fine tuning of the language to get the image exactly where I want it to. Um, so being a little bit reflective, I think more often than not, the challenge is me, not necessarily the AI. And that's where that lifelong learner, right, comes into play. And not having to use the AI when it's an urgent issue, right? Until you
Yeah.
become a master of something, you really want to interact with it during like a non-pressure time when you really have time to work with it and work through it.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually reminds me too. I've been doing a lot of what the kids call vibe coding, where you let AI write your code, um, and that has very interesting ways of going very wrong. That are also like the solution to is really around structured thinking, and it's not just putting a couple words in and hoping for the best, but it's about thinking about, what are the outcomes and the results you'll want to see from this code base, and then knowing enough to work with the model when it kind of strays from that plan. Um, the other thing that I've found a lot recently with like the newest crop of models is they're very eager to please, and they tend to do things sometimes that are redundant, or layer in, there's hallucination, but sometimes it's not a hallucination the way that maybe a lot of people think of with a made up fact. It's a totally true fact that you've already made the point, or in code base, it's totally valid code that duplicates something that already exists. It's kind of been lazy on that search and kind of context gathering phase, and then, super diligent on the code writing phase, and you just end up with a jumbled mess. Um, and I think that there's some really interesting parallels to how I think about my own work, or how if I'm working on a team and if I'm in my silo, I don't pick up my head and say, "Hey, who's working on what?" Like I might go and recreate something that doesn't already exist, right? And my AI kind of copies that sometimes. So that's something to be mindful of as you go deeper into like larger thinking models and building projects with AI.
That's awesome. And something occurred to me that I want to ask you about. let's dive into the coding, and I know you can probably answer this in the consulting world as well. Would you consider yourself to be a better coder or consultant knowing what you know now with AI, and why?
Yes, no, 100%. So, you know, there's knowing a thing and understanding why a thing needs to be the way it is. And then there's the nitty-gritty details of, every business is extremely, they're common, but they're also very unique, right? Like the consulting model is I learn something from my own experience or from going to 20 different companies. So when I come to your company, I'm going to know exactly what to do. And that kind of works because you can think about it in frameworks and models, and there's enough human judgment in that loop that works. But like now thinking about consulting where I don't have a giant team, or I'm trying to go and get done in a week what used to take me a month or a year, gathering that information, staging that context, and being able to pick out the important signals is massively accelerated by AI. And same thing with code, right? Like I've always known how a lot of different coding topics and concepts worked, but I don't know the latest libraries. I don't know their syntax. I don't know, best practice for testing and building. And like I'm not a software developer. I would have to spend 10 hours a day just doing that, which would be then at the expense of other things that I know and I'm good at. So I find coding lets me go faster, or AI lets me go faster with these things. Um, but then the true, I think, wisdom that doesn't go away, at least hasn't been automated yet, is kind of knowing when to stop, or knowing when to, ask for that broader context. Because even if you think you can solve the problem in this window of a code base or this window of a company you're looking at, there's probably some knowledge out there that the AI isn't thinking to look for. And that's really where a human can kind of come in and add a lot of value and make a much better outcome. JM from YouTube says, how do I do this? Uh, says context saves lives, and man, isn't that true in
Yes.
life and in an AI. Thank you, Jan. Let's see here.
Yeah, I
So
think I think at Enable, right, along that, what we've really tried to push is in help educate and share, right, is that context is king. Kind of trust, verify, right? Trust but verify, and really do it in an ethical way. I know you want to jump back in there, so let's jump back into
yeah,
what you have
well,
on the
no,
screen.
this is I think supporting. So a lot of the stuff with context and struggles, especially with business adaptation, is around this concept of bias and hallucination. And context is the cure to hallucination if it's managed well. Um, but there's a massive amount of, I think, concern about that. And um, I think that a lot of organizations maybe downplay AI or really limit the kind of scope of what they let it do because of this fear. So one of the things I think that is helpful as you get into these things is to get comfortable with the hallucination and recognize it when it happens, and then learn kind of between your individual workflow of like how to better prompt or better set up things like Pi and projects so that you have context that comes in when you're doing your generation, that will minimize your hallucination. But the other thing that will also help is um, being systematic about it and thinking, whether from coding and model development, having evaluations, having kind of automated tests that look for certain prompts and certain contexts that give you the hallucination you don't want, and keep you towards the factual data. Um, but this, I think, kind of is the root cause of a lot of non-adoption or initial turnoff. So it's definitely something that, like, I think, we could, maybe I will, after this, make a whole, article about, you can get comfortable with hallucination and learn how to mitigate it. You will see a lot more outcomes, and benefits from Gen AI.
That would be a great read.
Awesome. I'm inspired. Um, yeah, so if we had more people here asking questions, they might also ask us things about robust data security and privacy. So I'll pretend like somebody just asked this, but that's again, that's a big blocker, right? And this is also kind of foundational to kind of our philosophy. Um, it, as cool as AI is, it at the end of the day is nothing without its data and data protection, data governance, privacy, sovereignty. These are all things that need to be thought through in any kind of system. And the default model that is free is using your data to train itself to get better. Um, and even in the kind of the semi-private instances, the more control you have more control you have over your data, kind of the better the outcomes you're going to get. So a lot of organizations, especially larger enterprise and security conscious business situations, have to be very careful about data security. And a lot of AI is just a big black box because we're just so early in the introduction of products and services. They want to get things that work, and then they'll secure them later. But this doesn't always work for people.
Yeah, Randy, how would you describe, let's dive down a little bit into your data and what that actually means, right? I think a lot of us have worked for corporations in the past, and right, we've had a device that's been the company's device, and everything has been protected and controlled and owned by that company. And there are a lot of shifts, right? There are a lot more startups, there are a lot more solopreneurs, there are a lot more people who are taking their expertise and using that in the world in a way that we have not used that in the past. And I think we're going to see that even more. So what does an individual's data mean to an individual, and not just my credit card information or my social security number? Like,
Yeah,
w-
you ever get included in one of those class action leaks where like one of the big like Experian has a data leak and you get like a check for the value of your data that leaked and it's like $5
yep.
if you're lucky. That's what a court of law has determined your data is worth after legal fees and whatnot. But I think that it's actually worth a whole lot more. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think because our lives are so digital and everything we do is recorded or there's a exhaust of data that you put off as you interact with the world. All of that information can be used to predict what you need or better understand and analyze your life, and most of it is lost. I think actually one of the things that got me really excited about generative AI is you think about like the 80/20 again, kind of classic consulting, like, 80% of the outcomes come from 20% of the inputs. And that model probably is even like more like 95/5 in terms of the 95% of the data that exists in the world is in an unstructured form or is somewhere that like is not really that useful for the kind of analytics that you'd want to do if you wanted to, optimize your life or automate things or get real good insights to kind of expand your business. With Gen AI, you can just put someone on the task of data entry of turning that 95% into the structure that you can use for a lot of different purposes. And so if you just had a magic wand you could wave and make that data visible, all of a sudden you just get so much more, clarity and visibility and ability to take action as a company and as an individual. So then, to me, it's probably the 99% and 1% or even more of like how much my data, things that I have created from my knowledge and actions, is inaccessible to me. And even if I got a dump of it from, Facebook or from wherever, like I wouldn't know what to do with it. So to be able to start to take some of that percentage back, to structure it, to use it to again minimize the hallucination of my personal AI, and to have it feed into different processes to, just know things about me and know, that's either really exciting or really scary, I guess, depending on how you
Mhm.
feel about privacy and about how much you trust the stewards of that data that make that happen.
And that can manifest itself quite a few ways, right? If you think about what are your needs for your family, and how data plays a role in that. Think about mental health, right? How hard I'm driving at something or doing and taking breaks and engaging with others. Um, there are so many dimensions to the data and what it your personal data, what it tells you and what story it is and where it leads you. Missed opportunities, right?
Totally.
Uh, so yeah, I love the concept of starting to take some of that back and really starting to understand how that can play a role in our lives and in maybe how we've missed things historically, and this could really change the game and be a game changer for the future.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about like, in my lifetime, I have maybe a shoebox full of Polaroid pictures, or just pictures from ages, 0 to 6, right? I have probably taken more photos of my kids yesterday than exist of me for that entire, period of my
Mhm.
life. And the I think the kids today grow up, they don't know a world without that abundant kind of external memory of what they were doing and with whom, right? So their kids, or maybe even sooner, may not ever need to wonder what was the name of that restaurant that I went to the other day that I really liked, and can I get something similar, or order or takeout that is cooked in the same way but has my allergies, and all of this like kind of futuristic stuff that we could imagine if that data was known.
Yeah,
Um, Very exciting, very scary if it's in the hands of a big face corporation. Uh, is why we're here. Which is why we're excited. And
absolutely.
on that note, I do have to cut this one a little short to run to some of these meetings. But JM, thank you so much for your comments. Really appreciate your questions. I hope this helped a little bit. Definitely feel free to reach out to us, GB or RL at enable.ai, and we'd be happy to talk to you some more about how we get our AI to understand your data. But yeah, just check it out, and we'll be back next week to talk through more Nexus Live.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Jerry. Have a good
Bye.
one.